Let's jump right in and look at adding positive and negative numbers. We'll start with integers so we can get the concepts down. There are really just 4 situations that we need to look at, and once we get a handle on those, we can add positive and negative numbers whenever we run across them. So the first situation is where both numbers are positive. The second situation is where both numbers are negative. And the third situation is the first number is positive, the second number is negative, and the fourth situation is the first number is negative and the second number is positive. So let's deal with each one of these separately. We'll start with the positive and positive. Now this is something that's not a big surprise. You've been doing this for years by this point. It would be something like where you have 3 plus 6. Well, that's simple enough. That's 9. Voila. So we don't really care about that one. We'll ignore that. Now it gets more interesting when the numbers can be negative. So our first situation, we have negative 5 plus negative 2. And I keep that second number, which is negative, in parentheses, so I avoid this strange looking plus minus thing, positive and then a negative in the same row. You might see that. There's nothing technically wrong with it, but it's a lot easier to read if I keep that second number separated with parentheses, so I see that I'm adding a negative number. So since I'm adding 2 negative numbers, I'm simply taking the absolute value of each of those numbers, adding them together, and then making that result negative. So absolute value is the distance from 0 of a number. We can simply think of, for a negative number, the absolute value of negative 5, how far away from 0 is that? It's 5 units. So the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. So you can kind of strip away the negative to find the absolute value. So the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. The absolute value of negative 2 is 2. So 5 plus 2 is 7. And so I add 5 and 2, get 7. And then since both numbers were negative, my result is negative 7. Voila, done. Now these next 2 situations are pretty interesting. So I have a positive plus a negative. So let's come up with an example of a positive plus a negative. How about 12 plus negative 4? 12 plus negative 4. Since the signs of these numbers are different, what I'm going to do is find the absolute value of both numbers and subtract them. Simple as that. The absolute value of 12 is 12. The absolute value of negative 4 is 4. I subtract 4 from 12 and I get 8. And then I use the sign of whichever one of these numbers has the larger absolute value. In this case, 12 has the larger absolute value, so I'm going to use a positive sign. So 12 minus 4 is 8. Well, let's say I have a situation that's just slightly different. 5 plus negative 9. I'm going to follow the same process. Find the absolute value of both numbers. The absolute value of 5 is 5. The absolute value of negative 9 is 9. Subtract those. 9 minus 5 is 4. So I know the result is going to be 4, but is it positive or negative? So I look at the sign of the number that has the bigger absolute value. In this case, that's negative 9. So the result is going to be negative. Since negative 9 has a bigger absolute value than 5, I'm using the sign of negative 9. So 9 minus 5 is 4, and I will make that result negative. Negative 4. Now we have a very similar situation. It's just sometimes a negative number comes first. So if I have negative 3 plus 10, I'm following the exact same process. I find the absolute value of those 2 numbers and subtract. So 10 minus 3 is 7. And since 10 has a bigger absolute value than negative 3, I'm going to use the positive sign from the 10. And this is 7. I have one final example here. If I have negative 8 plus 1, same process. Subtract the absolute values of both numbers. The absolute value of negative 8 is 8. Absolute value of 1 is 1. 8 minus 1 is 7. And then the question is, should it be positive or negative? Well, that negative 8 has the bigger absolute value. So the result here is -7.